Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Bet Right Sports Betting Podcast presented by the Six Pack Coverage Media Network. It's your co-host, Jeff Farrell, here with my co-host, Andrew Tanzi, coming at you to break down the AFC North last division in the NFL that we are going to cover. We're going to do an in-depth analysis on each team, go over any futures bets and anything that we see valuable in the futures market right now. We're only a couple weeks from the start of the season, so we're getting pretty close to that week one date. Rue, you ready to break down this last division here and put a cap on our off-season preview?
Oh yeah, here we are, baby. The final division. I'm so excited. What are we now? 2, 3 weeks away from kickoff. If that maybe we're within 3 weeks, right? It's
Yeah,
just
so right now it's Sunday, August 21st. By the time you guys are listening to this, I think it'll be officially 2 weeks
two
from
weeks.
the
Yeah.
day of the first game. So that's exciting.
Woohoo! All right, let's get
This
to it.
this division should be a good one. We were obviously waiting on that Desean Watson news for what felt like years, and we finally got it. He's going to be suspended 11 games. I still think this division is going to be a dogfight. I think the Ravens and Bengals are two worthy favorites up top. The Steelers are always lurking down there, trying to muck it up and win these ugly games. And Mike Tomlin, you can never count him out. So I think this is going to be a really interesting one. Any takes on the division as a whole, or anything to say before we head into the Bengals, which will be our first team?
No overall takes. More just like this isn't like like a big picture type division for me. Like I just love diving to each of these teams because I think you can make a strong case for so many of these teams to finish great or finish bad. So yeah, this is one of the most exciting divisions. So I'm glad we saved this for last.
Okay. All right. First up will be the Cincinnati Bengals. Win total is around 9.5 in the market. They're minus 130 to make the playoffs and plus 170 to win the AFC North. I think them and the Ravens were both around plus 200 earlier in the offseason when it looked like Watson was going to play more games. So Ravens have dropped a lot. Bengals have dropped a little bit. In the offseason, they lost tight end CJ Uzama, tackle Riley Reef, defensive tackle Larry Ogunjobi, and then cornerback Trey Waynes. They also have safety Jesse Bates is currently still holding out with a contract dispute that's been going on all offseason. It kind of seemed like it was nothing at first, but I mean, the fact that he's still holding out now is a little bit of a concern because he is a big player on this defense. So we'll have to see what happens with that. They did draft safety Dax Hill, but I think they were kind of looking to pair him with Jesse Bates, not necessarily replace him. And then they also added Hayden Hurst, the tight end, and then they really fortified the offensive line. Alex Kappa, Lyle Collins, and Ted Karras, all big offseason acquisitions. So I think that was kind of the one thing that everyone was looking at going into last season. Like, yes, you have all these weapons and Burrow, that's great and all, but like, can you protect him? Obviously, he held up last season. Now they even improved that offensive line. So I think that should be a real sticking point of this offseason for the Bengals, noting that they really made those upgrades there. Where are you at on this team? It seems like there's a lot of hype on the Ravens coming into this year. I feel like the Bengals are almost kind of like flying under the radar a little bit, which is crazy since they went to the Super Bowl last year. Where are you at on this team?
So yeah, you hit the nail on the head with that. I was almost disappointed when the lines first came out because I was expecting
Yeah, you kind
all
of
this.
expected everyone to
Yeah.
be on the Bengals and the Ravens would be the team that you could kind of buy, but it's been the opposite.
So I was going in expecting like a 10.5 Bengals win total, take the under and buy low on the Ravens. But I think the books honestly did a pretty good job setting the lines here. So, like you said, the thing we've been preaching about for years is they finally made the upgrades to the offensive line, which was their biggest weakness, even after going to the Super Bowl. So you'd think it'd be like, okay, they addressed their weakness. Now they're going to be better. And I'm just kind of like, not so fast here because you turn back the clock to last year, everything just broke this team's way. And you just kind of start inside the division. The Ravens were absolutely decimated by injuries the entire season. The fact they were even in the conversation for the playoffs towards the end of the year was a miracle. So that led to the Bengals being able to blow them out twice. You have the Steelers playing with Ben Roethlisberger, who probably should have been retired before last season, and the Browns, who they actually lost to, were playing with an injured Baker Mayfield for almost the entire season. So it almost kind of came to the point where it was the Bengals division to lose. And this was still a team that had some bad losses on their schedule. They lost to the Bears. They lost to the Mike White led Jets. It took a last minute field goal to beat the Jacksonville Jaguars. So they had some big wins when Burrow and Jamar Chase would go off. But overall, at the end, when it was all said and done at the end of the season, they played what was the easiest schedule in the entire NFL from a DVOA perspective. They really didn't deal with any injuries. And here's an interesting stat that I saw. Their opponent's field goal percentage was 74%, which was the lowest in the league. Now, that's like a stretch, but I thought that was pretty interesting, just kind of to put a cherry on top of how everything broke their way. And that began in the season opener against the Vikings when they went to overtime and the Vikings missed a 30-yarder to win it. So, and then something else I kind of touched on last week, as good as they were, Joe Burrow performed at a historic level. So I'll reiterate the stat I brought up last week. He had a 70% completion percentage and threw for 8.9 yards per attempt over the course of a 16 or more game season in NFL history. That had only been done 2 times. So as great as Joe Burrow is, 2 times in NFL history that's been done. So you're going to expect some regression from that standpoint. So when I just kind of look at this team as a whole, everything went right for them. The Ravens are going to be back and healthy this year. The schedule is going to be much tougher for them. So that being said, where the line is, I think it's a pass, but I'm really looking to fade this team early in the season in some matchups, and that's starting week 1, taking the Steelers plus 6.5. So this is more of a week to week fade the hype type thing, because I think the futures markets did a pretty good job with the pricing.
Okay, I think that's fair. I think they're a very interesting team. I agree. I think the win total at 9.5 is right on. I think I'm a slight lean to the over, but I don't think I'm going to bet it. I do have a ticket on them to win the division. I think there's some value at plus 170. I just think that they're pretty even with the Ravens for me. Like you said, the schedule overall, it's pretty tough. It is backloaded though. I do prefer the easier schedule up front. So like the final 6 weeks of the season for this team, absolutely brutal. Chiefs, Browns, at Bucks, at Patriots, Bills, and Ravens. Whereas the first half of the schedule, you get teams like the Jets, the Falcons, the Panthers, the Browns without Watson thrown in there. So I think this is the team that I could definitely see coming out to a hot start, and then maybe they struggle a little bit later in the year. So I think if you do want to buy them, the time is probably now. I know what you're saying about the Burrow stats. Like, I don't necessarily think that he can keep up the incredible efficiency that he had last year, but like they bring back the exact same group of weapons. They're all incredibly young. I mean, T. Higgins going into season 3, Jamar Chase season 2. Like these guys are all peaking at the exact same time. Like I don't think it's a stretch to say that this offense could be the number 1 offense is all of football. Like you upgrade the offensive line, you already have a good running back, you already have probably the best group of receivers in the league. Like I think if the defense is just average and this is a top 3 offense in the league, I think you could easily see them win 10 or 11 games. And I kind of like the price. I also kind of like them to make the playoffs minus 130. That feels a little bit low. Like I know the AFC is loaded this year, but I just feel like that should be probably a little bit higher. That close to even money. I think there's some value on that as well as a shot on them to win the division if you're not super high on the Ravens.
Yeah, I just think you really need them to take care of business early in the season. Like you said, if they drop that opening game versus Pittsburgh, it's going to be some trouble. I know you still have games against the Jets and Dolphins and stuff, but you really need them to start off pretty strong before that week 10 bye week. And then they have that gauntlet to end the season.
Yeah, and like you said, last year was weird. They were a team that, they beat up on some really good teams. They beat the Ravens by like 20 plus points 2 times. They beat the Chiefs late in the year. But then, like you said, they had those brutal losses to teams that they never should have lost to. So I wonder if that's going to continue into this year where we're seeing them, struggle in these early games. Then maybe they rip off a bunch of wins late in the season against these good teams. So it's an interesting team to figure out. I don't know if we have enough data to say if that's really predictive or that was just some weird scenarios last year. But I think that's definitely something to keep an eye out for if you do want to take a shot on this. I mean, even Steelers money line week 1, if you do think some of that could continue this year, might be a good play.
And I still it's just weird to say it after they went to the Super Bowl, but I still don't trust Zach Taylor. This team, with as high power of an offense as they have on paper, he still plays at a slow pace. He still wants to run the ball more than he should. So I don't know. I want to see how he does in a tougher schedule and when you got to face some adversity, because with everything that went on in the division, like I said, it was really there for the taking, and I think it'll be a much tougher road to get to I can see them making the playoffs. I do like that minus 130 bet. But I will touch on the Ravens, who I like much more, to win the division in a minute.
To be fair to Zach Taylor, because I do agree with what you're saying, I don't think he's a great head coach. I'm still not 100% sold on him. But to be fair to him, I did think that he showed a lot of promise last year. Like, yes, a lot of the things in the regular season at least broke his way, but like going into Kansas City in the AFC Championship game, what were they down 21 points in the first half, and they came back and won the game, and then they go to the Super Bowl, and obviously they didn't win, but like they were right there with the Rams blow for blow. Like, it's not like he got to a big moment and kind of like turtled up. Like, they were right there. It was right there for the taking. So I do think he earned some credit and some respect from me for that, from that perspective.
But you need to show me it wasn't just a fluke season, because there are these teams, and when we look back at like there comes this point where so Joe Burrow loses the Super Bowl and everyone's like, oh, he'll be back. Not always the case in the NFL. It reminds me a little bit of like Cam Newton, his MVP season where they went to the Super Bowl. Everyone was like, oh, Cam's going to be back. He looked like he was on top of the world. Now, I'm not necessarily comparing them. I'm just saying everyone thought Cam was going to be back. Well, it's a tough road in the NFL to make it to the Super Bowl. So maybe the injury luck flips the opposite way for them this year and your season derails pretty early. So, from Zach Taylor, I agree. I do give him a lot of credit, but it's just one season. I want to see some consistency, because the year before that, well, I guess you can't really say that Burrow was out, so we can scratch that one. But
yeah, the years when he didn't have Burrow or really any quarterback, he was terrible. But so, all right, ready to move on to the Ravens?
Yes.
All right, Ravens have a win totals actually up to 10.5 in a lot of places. I think there's still some 10s out there. We have to pay a decent amount of juice to go over there. Minus 160 to make the playoffs, plus 145 the favorite to win the division. Mike Mcdonald replaces defensive coordinator Wink Martindale. He was the DC for John's brother Jim at Michigan. Offseason acquisitions, they added safety Marcus Williams from the Saints and quarterback Kyle Fuller. They also drafted Kyle Hamilton from Notre Dame, offensive lineman Tyler Lindenbaum, and then linebacker David Ajabo from Michigan. And then they did lose quite a bit on offense. Both running backs, Latavius Murray and Devontae Freeman, don't expect to need them this year, but, they lost the depth there. And then Hollywood Brown, their number one wide receiver, was the big one that they lost. And then Sammy Watkins, who I don't know why, but when I was doing like my offseason research, I legitimately forgot that he was even on this team. Like I had to like double check 3 times. Like, Sammy Watkins really on the Ravens? Like, he was so irrelevant.
I remember him because of the end of that the Lions game. He's the one who like caught the ball and didn't run out of bounds before that Justin Tucker 68-yarder to win.
So he made it even harder on them.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Well, he's gone. So yeah. And then the running back room's kind of the status is still up in the air. I know there's been a lot of kind of up and down this offseason with J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards. It sounds like Edwards is reportedly a few weeks behind Dobbins as his recovery, and Dobbins is looking like he's going to be questionable for week 1. So we'll see who's out there at running back, but it looks like a lot of the main guys are going to be back at full strength for this team. John Harbaugh entering year 14 with the Baltimore Ravens. They have averaged 9.8 wins per season over that span. One of the most successful teams in the regular season. They've had double-digit wins in, I believe, 8 of those 14 seasons. To be honest, Harbaugh at this point in his career with this team, he's just a coach that I would never bet the under on. Like, I don't necessarily love this team. We'll get into a little bit here, but like, I would never bet the under on a John Harbaugh coach team just based on the amount of success and the record that he has. To start off, let's talk about Lamar Jackson. We all know the story of last season, played 12 games due to injuries, but when he was out there, he really struggled by his standards. Only 16 touchdown passes, a career high 13 interceptions, a career low in rushing yards per game. He ranked 19th in DVOA among all quarterbacks. We had that unbelievable Thursday night football game against the Dolphins where Brian Flores is literally sending the house, all out blitzes on every play, and Lamar just cannot figure out what to do. They only scored 10 points in that game, took 4 sacks, threw an interception. Like, it was a weird year for Lamar. It was kind of a weird year for this offense and the whole team. Now they traded away Hollywood Brown. Where are you at with Lamar coming into the season? And then, where are you at with this team as a whole?
Just stop with the Lamar slander.
I'm literally asking a question. I'm just stating the facts of what happened last year and asking a question. It's not slander. That it happened.
It happened, but it was a reset year for this team. This team.
It's a reset year.
I don't know how they make these injury lucks rankings, but yes,
the Ravens, they're not 32nd. Then
they are, and they were 32nd. And just by you don't even need to see the number to realize. They're 32nd.
All right. I thought you were going to say it was like 15th or something insane.
No. No. They were down to their third or fourth string running back before the third week of preseason last year. Then they had,
but they won every preseason game.
So they certainly
that
won
was
every
the goal.
preseason game. Yes, that was they accomplished that. So then they were losing offensive linemen. Then they were losing. By the end of the season,
the secondary was gone too.
I don't even know who was playing in the secondary by the end of the season. So it was a reset year. And when I say reset year, I'm not. Again, I like doing these comparisons, but it's not apples to apples. It was when the Lakers, LeBron sat out that year with injury. They had all these injuries. They came back and they were back. I'm just saying that's what it is. This team, it was
Lamar is now LeBron James
last year, and even with Tyler Huntley, this team was competitive. Now I know they dropped their last 6 games, but they almost every game down the stretch of the season, outside of one against the Bengals, was with 3 points or less. So they
had 2 of them at the end when they went for 2 down 1, and then they didn't get it.
So they almost beat Green Bay. They almost beat the Rams. They almost beat the Steelers twice. They were right there, even with all these injuries they sustained. So now you're coming back, and with all these injuries, it changed the entire identity of the team. They couldn't be a run-first offense anymore. They were throwing 30-plus times a game, whether it was Lamar or Tyler Huntley. Wink Martindale, part of the reason I think he got fired is because he was still playing this aggressive blitz-heavy defense, leaving this third and fourth string secondary to one-on-one coverage, and the pass rush isn't getting there. So I think this year the Ravens can go back to being the Ravens again. And I did expect them to be a little more slept on. I did grab them pretty early and bet them to win the division. I like the first 3 picks in the draft they made with Kyle Hamilton, Linderbaum, and Ajabo. I think those were 3 pretty good ads. And I think this secondary is going to be really elite with a good, solid defensive line. I like Mike Mcdonald. He was only gone from this organization for 1 season with Michigan. Now, I don't like comparing college to NFL, but Michigan had a great defense last year, and he's been with this organization, so he's familiar with them. I'm expecting to see a little bit more of a balanced approach than we got with Wink Martindale, but I think the personnel on defense is great. And I think people really just forget how good Lamar Jackson is at his peak. And we're talking about a guy that's only 25 years old, has already won an MVP, and over the course of his first full 2 seasons as a starter, he threw for 62 touchdowns, the 15 interceptions, and rushed for 2,211 yards and 14 touchdowns. So it doesn't just get thrown away because of one bad season last year.
Why does the bad season get thrown away then?
Because he was in and out of the lineup. First of all, whatever this dude's diet was
like
last
10
year,
games in a row to start the year.
This dude was going around like licking doorknobs last year because every week he was sick with something else. Every week, the guy, I don't even know if the guy practiced last year. Every week he had a stomach flu or fever or something. Not once was it COVID.
Every Wednesday it was like Lamar Jackson dealing with illness, should be fine for Sunday every week.
Yeah. So I trust Lamar, and I think everything's going to click back this year as long as they stay healthy. And like you said, John Harbaugh, I think just far and away one of the best, probably top 3 to 5 coaches in the NFL. And the fact that he was able to do or even be close with some of the top teams in the league last year with Tyler Huntley, I think deserves some credit. So I absolutely love this team to win the division. I do still think they're a step above the Bengals right now. So I think this team, and I do have a Super Bowl ticket on them as well. So I think they can make some. Dude, their price at 20-1 to me is outrageous. That is where I think they were being slept on in the market as a Super Bowl price. So I had to buy in.
Okay, I'm going to push back here on a couple things.
Please.
I agree with you on the defense. I think they're going to be awesome. Love the talent there. No issue. Love Harbaugh. No issue there. I'm going to push back on the offense. I know you want to say you trust Lamar, all that. That's fine. I'm not quite there, but look at the setup of this offense right now. This is the year 2022. I know they want to run the ball. That's great. They're going to try and run the ball with 2 running backs coming off of major knee surgery, knee issues, whatever, torn ACLs. We don't know what status they're going to be. They might not even play week 1. Already an issue there. Now you look at the receiving game. Mark Andrews is an incredible tight end, absolutely elite, no questions. They're going into the season with the top 3 wide receivers as Rashad Bateman, Devin Duvernay, and James Prochet. Lamar's great and all, but they're not giving him any help. The defense is going to be awesome. I have serious concerns about this offense. He had a real good connection with Hollywood Brown, and he's gone now. Burrow and Chase and Higgins, my God, they're going to be going up and down the field. Like, and the Ravens are going to just get the ball and try and run it 16 times to go score a touchdown when the Bengals get it and throw one pass and score. Like,
yeah, but
that's a real
Mark
concern
Andrews is
for me.
enough for this offense. Like, I get what you're saying, but this isn't.
He was enough when you had Hollywood. There's no one on the outside now.
We don't know what Rashad Bateman has, but
exactly.
But this is what I'm saying.
Suck.
Last year, like they don't want to play like last year. We don't want 30 passes a game. He can throw 25 passes.
I don't know if they
game.
have a choice. They might not just be able to manufacture this run game out of nothing.
I'll give you the Dobbins and Edwards. That's obviously a little bit concerning.
It's not like if Jonathan Taylor back there that you can just hand them the ball and you know you're fine.
It sounds like Dobbins could be ready for week 1. Edwards probably not.
But could be ready isn't the same as like he's 100% ready to go.
But if you have
form.
But if you have Lamar Jackson rushing for 1,000 yards, that's your running game. You don't need another 1,000 yard running back. He was running for that
last year and they didn't have a running game.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. That he was running for his life last year. They didn't have an offensive line. They were playing from behind because the defense was so banged up and injured, and like it was whole. That's what I was saying. It changed the entire identity of this team. So, and at least they're somewhat preparing for Dobbins to be on a pitch count to start the year. Edwards maybe not to be. Dobbins got hurt in week 2 of preseason, then Gus Edwards got hurt. So it's not, they didn't have all this time to prepare for it. It was just, all right, next man up. And then, you're down to Tyson Williams to start the year.
Do you call signing Mike Davis preparing for the loss of a running back? That's their preparation plan. Mike Davis? You kidding me? God, if we see him week 1, they're in trouble.
They got the Jets.
Okay, and then we want to talk about the playoffs here. This is never, ever in my life a team that I would want to bet on to win the Super Bowl.
Here we go with the Lamar Jackson stinks in the playoffs. Like,
I want to see it before I buy into it.
No, then it'll be too late.
It hasn't been too late for the 4 years prior. 1-3 in the playoffs, 3 passing touchdowns to 5 interceptions, 5 fumbles, and 19 sacks taken. That's like Drew Lock would have a better playoff statistical.
All right, what is like Aaron Rodgers done in the last 2 or 3 postseasons? Like it's
okay, but we've seen it with Rodgers. We have evidence that
we've seen it with Rodgers. What, 15 years ago when he won the Super Bowl? What I mean, come on, what are we talking about here?
They played a bad game last year in the playoffs.
A bad game. They had home.
Look, I'm not betting on the Packers to win either. I'm not making a case for them.
I'm just saying your sample size is 4 games, and the guy's 25 years old. You're acting
and
like
they've all been horrible.
Oh my God. It's just such a tired argument. Fine. Ravens make the playoffs.
It would be a larger sample if he could win a freaking game and make it to the second round. Then maybe have a larger sample size. He's 25
years old. He's been a starter for he hasn't even played an entire 3 full seasons as a starting quarterback.
What'd Joe Burrow do last year?
Yeah,
we pretty good to me.
Yeah, I'm sure if the Bengals lost their entire team and the Steelers were playing with Ben Roethlisberger as their quarterback, the Ravens would win the division.
I'm talking about when they went to the playoffs. When he went to the playoffs, he had his whole team. What was his excuse then?
What are you talking? I don't know. What are you talking about?
You're making excuses for Lamar's issues in the playoffs, and I said Joe Burrow got there last year and was incredible.
I am not making excuses. I'm saying to make a blanket statement and say they can't make noise in the playoffs because Lamar's 1-3 in the playoffs.
I didn't say they can't. I'm just saying I would never bet on it.
Okay, that's fine. I'm not going back to the games and saying this is why they lost this. This is why they lost this. No, Lamar wasn't great. Fine. It was 4 games, and look, he won 1 of them. Fine. He could easily wait. Like that's all. Like, come on. We're not talking about a 30-year-old veteran quarterback. This guy's been in the league for 4 years.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Get it done this year.
Ridiculous.
All right. So you're betting them to win the division and make the playoffs, or just win the division?
Win the division and win the Super Bowl.
Oh, win the Super Bowl, right. All right. Would you touch the win total where it is now?
I would lean the over, but you lost the number's gone at this point.
Yeah, so, you had 9.5 for a couple months. Yeah, I agree. All right. Anything left to say on the Ravens? We'll agree to disagree.
All right. This should be a fun season.
We'll see. All right, next up, Cleveland Browns win total is 8 or 8.5, depending on where you're looking at in the market. Plus 175 to make the playoffs, plus 450 to win the division. Those are the latest odds I have after all of the Desean Watson nonsense. You probably could have got numbers in a variety of different places throughout the offseason. The big offseason acquisition, obviously, aforementioned Desean Watson. Also got wide receiver Amari Cooper from the Cowboys. Didn't draft anybody, had no picks in the first 2 rounds. They did lose offensive lineman
Well,
JC.
David Bell.
What's up?
David Bell's a solid wide receiver potential.
Maybe. Yeah.
Hmm.
I just said they didn't have any picks in the first 2 rounds.
You said they didn't draft anybody. That's, they drafted some people.
Did they take him in the second round?
No, they took him in the third round.
Oh, no, I meant they didn't draft anyone in the first 2 rounds.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. If I said they didn't draft anybody at all, that was incorrect. Okay, they lost offensive lineman J.C. Treader, tight end Austin Hooper, wide receivers Jarvis Landry, and OBJ was obviously traded last year, and then cornerback Troy Hill. Obviously, the big story we all know, Desean Watson suspended for the first 11 games, so he will return week 13 against the Texans, which is just going to be incredible.
So convenient.
I can already feel a Texans money line in week 13.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be incredible. All right. So this is a tough one. I mean, I think like we love the roster. I love the coaching staff. I think Jacoby Brissett stinks. Like maybe you can say he's a capable-ish backup, but like, backing up and, having to start 11 straight games to start the season is kind of two different things, in my opinion. I think Brissett's fine if he has to come in for a game or two here and there. I don't know if he's necessarily the guy I would want in here for 11 games. I was, trying to see if maybe they would go for Jimmy G. I mean, at this point, like when does a team have to sign Jimmy G if they're going to sign him? Like, is he just not going to be signed at this point, or do you think there's still a chance that he goes somewhere?
I don't know what's going to happen there. Right? The Browns were obviously one of the destinations, but the fact that they're getting Watson back this season is definitely not going to happen. And then
you don't think they would even just bring him in for 11 games?
No.
I mean, they're basically wasting the whole season, though. Like, do they really think Brissett can keep him at like 500?
I think that's kind of what you keep him at 500.
Really? I don't know.
Look, Brissett, his record as a starter, not great, 14-23, 36 TDs, only 16 interceptions. And this is the best situation he's been in because this is a team with the makeup of this team, the roster. He doesn't need to do a whole lot other than not screw up because when this offensive line is healthy, they're top 5, even after losing center J.C. Treader. Both tackles missed a lot of time last year. And even then, they were top in the league in adjusted line yards, 4th in pass block win rate. So this was still a great offensive line, even with some injuries. And the tackle tandem is one of the best in the league. So they have 4 extremely winnable games to start the season. So I think that can help them get their bearings a little bit. I absolutely love them in week 1 against the Panthers. We can get to that in our week Panthers. 1 preview. Obviously, a great pass rush with Myles Garrett. I think this team is a little bit more susceptible to the running game. They weren't great against the run last year. They didn't really make any upgrades on the interior, but when you look at the schedule, there aren't too many teams outside of Baltimore twice and maybe New England that are really huge threats in the run game. So I think this team has great pieces to put around a quarterback like Jacoby Brissett, and they can at least tread water throughout the season. Now, I don't want this to be skewed as Watson comes back, Browns are around 500, and then they make like Desean Watson hasn't played football in 2 years, and I know he was barely played in their first preseason game, but the guy looked like he hadn't played football in 2 years. So I don't think this is going to be and this is why I just cannot touch a win total either way. Now Watson could easily come back and look great, but I'm not expecting him to come back against Houston and throw for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. And then after that, you're going to Cincinnati, then you're playing Baltimore, then you're playing New Orleans. So you got a tough road and not much time for him to really get back into the flow of things. So there's just a lot of unknowns with this team that I think they're a little bit untouchable. But like I said, I love them week 1 against the Panthers. And I think there's going to be chances with Brissett in there that they're going to be a little bit undervalued with him in there. So I'm going to keep looking to play them at some good numbers early in the season.
Yeah, I think that's a fair take. I think I'm a little bit lower on them than you. I have a win total under 8.5, but that was kind of at a better number than now. I think I'd probably look at I think there's an under 7.5 at plus 150. I don't think that's a bad play just because, I mean, you go through the schedule, I guess it starts off easy the first 4 games, but like every time I go through their schedule, I think they're probably going to start 3-8 or 4-7 in the games with Brissett. Like after those first 4 games, it's Chargers, Patriots, at Ravens, Bengals, at Dolphins, at Bills, and then Bucks. Like that's just a brutal stretch. I know they have a good team, but like I mean, Brissett is just the worst quarterback on the field by such a wide margin in so many of those games. Like, I just have a hard time imagining them winning a ton of them. And then, I mean, like you said, Watson comes back and this team's 4-7. Like, they're probably not really in playoff contention. Watson hasn't played football in 22 months. He's never thrown a pass to any of these receivers. So I don't think he can be around the facility and practice with them during this time. Like, just a tough spot. Like, I think there's a pretty good chance they probably win like 7 games this year.
But you look at the matchups against like a Chargers, they could easily take control of that game on the ground. A team like the Bengals, they could take control and keep their offense off the field. The Patriots, I think, is a winnable game for them. So yeah, there's certainly a possibility to start out like 3-8, but I could also see them being 500 or so when Watson comes back, 5-6, 6-5, somewhere around there. I really do think. I mean, there's a realistic chance they could start out the season 4-0, 3-1, somewhere in there with these games. You get two of the worst teams in the league. Maybe you get Joe Flacco still in week 2 if Zach Wilson's not back. Carolina is a winnable game. The Steelers is a winnable game. So you never know, man. I mean, they start 3-1, 4-0. They could be in pretty good shape when Watson comes back. And Watson comes back, lays a stinker against Houston. Then people might be calling for Brissett to take over for full time.
Wouldn't that be quite the turn of events? We see him once and everyone wants him out of there already.
Yeah, so it's just, I mean, I'm surprised you kind of put a bet on this team with all the unknowns. Usually, we both kind of stay away from them. Like with Watson coming back, it just kind of changes everything.
I mean, yeah, I have a small bet before the number moved. Like, if I had to bet it now, I think I would lean towards under 7.5 just because it's a good price at plus 150. But it's not something that I'm really feeling strongly about or running to bet. Is this a team? So let's say they do tread water. Watson comes back. They're around 500. They're in playoff contention. Would you see yourself ever looking at them, like maybe getting a ticket on them to win the AFC if they're priced behind a lot of these teams just because they did start off a little bit slower? Like, what do you think the ceiling is with Watson when he does come back? Do you think they could be awesome, or are you not really buying them?
I do. If Desean Watson snaps back to what we're used to seeing, now he's never really been a winning quarterback, but he has the skill. Obviously, he's an upgrade from Brissett. But kind of like I said, with the makeup of this team, you don't need a great quarterback. So getting a great quarterback is all the better. When you have this good of an offensive line, you can hand it to a running back like Nick Chubb 20, 25 times per game and be moving up and down the field, and a defense that should be great, rushing the passer, secondary, like I said, maybe a little bit susceptible to the run, but not like a bottom 5 against a run. So I just think this team has all the pieces. So if you plug in a great quarterback in there, and if Watson still has it when he comes back, then yeah, I think this team could absolutely be dangerous in the playoffs for sure.
Okay. Fair enough. I didn't know you were going to be that high on them.
No reason not to. I mean, you see, I feel like at times you've seen what this team can do with a mediocre quarterback, which had been
Mayfield. Yeah, I think all the pieces are there. So. It's just like
this is a team that had been taught. The last 2 seasons we're getting some Super Bowl talk just based on the overall pieces they had here. Well, there's been some movement, but there's still a lot of talent on this roster on both sides of the ball. So I don't see any reason this team can't compete. But it's going to hinge on what Watson looks like when he gets back. So it'll be TBD. And I think you will get a good price. I mean, if he does look great against Houston and then Cincinnati and Baltimore, maybe there still might be price behind some of these top dogs in the AFC. So there could be some opportunity there.
Yeah. All right. Let's go on to our last team of the division here, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Win total is 7.5 plus 350 to make the playoffs, 10-1 to win the division. Added Mitch Trubisky, linebacker Miles Jack, and defensive tackle Larry Ogunjobi in the offseason. Also drafted quarterback Kenny Pickett, wide receiver George Pickens. Offseason losses, obviously Big Ben finally retired, lost Juju and James Washington in the passing game, along with Eric Ebron, and then Joe Scobert and cornerback Joe Hayden in the secondary. So decent amount of change here. The biggest one is obviously going to be the quarterback position. We do not have official word on whether it's going to be Trubisky or Pickett week 1. I think it's probably pointing to Trubisky early, and then if he struggles, they'll turn to Pickett, but we'll kind of see what happens. For me, I think this is a pretty similar situation to a team that we talked about last week with the Tennessee Titans, where, we talked about Mike Vrabel's gone over his win total in every single season, but yet the expectations for 2022 were so low. Enter Mike Tomlin. A Mike Tomlin coach Pittsburgh Steelers team has literally never finished below 500 in 14 years, which is absolutely incredible. They even had a year of 14 starts by Duck Hodges and Mason Rudolph and still eked out an 8-8 season. So, like, coming into that, the win total's 7 in some places, 7.5 in others. Like, Rue, what do you make of this information, and what do we do with the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2022? I can already see the smile coming. I know what the answer is, but I need to hear it.
We're going to get like 13 to 15 games of Mike Tomlin underdog spots.
Oh, yes, we are.
Is like, I couldn't ask for anything better. And look, we'll start with the good thing. We'll start with the defense. It was a weird season last year where certain games they just got absolutely gashed on the ground. It resulted in them allowing the highest yards per carry in the league at 5. But the years before that, 4.3, 3.8, 4.2, all top 12. They ranked top 5 in DVOA against the rush each of those 3 seasons. So I expect them to positively regress back to more towards the top end of the league, because this defensive line is still elite. They lost Stephon Tuitt, but obviously they still have the reigning defensive player of the year, TJ Watt. Cam Hayward is obviously elite, and they added Larry Ogunjobi, which I think just all the more gives them more depth and more threat on that defensive line. So this is a team that has led the league in sacks each of the last 5 seasons. So you see that and you're like,
that's amazing.
Isn't it? I couldn't believe it. I was looking
Holy
at it.
Crap.
5 seasons. So you're hoping on regression. I don't know if it's coming. So even with a new defensive coordinator stepping in, I'm not expecting for them to fall out of that, especially with the guys they're still putting up front there. So offensively, I don't care what anyone says. Mitch Trubisky is not a downgrade from the version of Ben Roethlisberger we saw last year. You could argue it's an upgrade because he can make plays with his legs behind this putrid offensive line. Which
any kind of mobility back there would definitely be a big help.
That's what I'm saying. And Mitch Trubisky, for all the hate he gets, this guy's 29-21 as a starter, and he took a similar 2018 Bears team to the playoffs. So it was the Bears finished 27th in points per game that season, and their defense was first in points allowed. So maybe the Steelers won't be to the extreme of either of those, but they could be somewhere, top 5 in points allowed and bottom 10 in points per game on offense. So I think if Trubisky can just do what he did that season and take care of the football, I think the fact this team made the playoffs last year is what we were seeing out of Big Ben. And we don't have to go into, the dynamics of that because we all watched it on a weekly basis. It was bad. So I took a shot on this team at plus 330 to make the playoffs. So you kind of covered the bases on Mike Tomlin. This guy's just another coach I never want to bet against. And when you get a spot like this where you can buy low on him, I think it's a great spot to take a shot.
Yeah, I think like you just said, like this is a team I would never in a million years bet the under on. Part of the reason the win total is so low, I guess you should mention, they do have the second toughest schedule in the NFL. So I think that's definitely part of it. Like they don't have a ton of easy games here. They do get the Falcons at the Panthers is pretty winnable, but like they're not going to be a favorite in many of these games. They do play against the Jets, but like it's a very tough schedule. So I think that's part of it. The offensive line is certainly going to be a problem. I think, like you said, Trubisky can be decent enough. I think maybe he can be an upgrade. Same thing with Pickett. Like the weapons on offense look really good. Najee Harris is an awesome running back. You have Deontay Johnson, Claypool, George Pickens looks like he's going to be really good from what we've seen in preseason. So I think the weapons are there. I think if they can just get decent quarterback play and really rely on this offense and just try and muck these games up and just keep them low scoring and rely on the defense, I think they can have some success. So I kind of like your bet plus 350 to make the playoffs right now. You can get that. I think that's decent way to attack this team, but I think really it's just going to be on a week-to-week basis when they're 3-point home underdogs, 7.5-point road underdogs, stuff like that. I think we're going to have tons of ways to bet on this team throughout the season. So I think that's probably my plan of attack here. I don't think I would want to bet over on the win total just because the schedule is so tough, and it's still tough to know what you're going to get out of the quarterback situation.
Look no further than week 1, my friend. Plus 6.5, similar to last year. And we'll get into it more in our week 1
preview, for sure.
Similar to last year, they were around the same spread at Buffalo, and I was all over the Steelers, and the Steelers ended up winning that game outright. So I love that spot in week 1 for the Steelers at plus 6.5.
Is there any chance that gets to 7? I feel like it's 6.5. Like, God, I know
so
I
was
the Steelers,
all
but I'm still
for 7, and then I saw a 6, so then I grabbed the 6.5.
It's going the wrong way,
and then the 6.5 popped back up. So yeah, it's still hanging out there. So if it gets to 7, I'll go back on it. But now I'm 95% confident we get Mitch Trubisky, but if Kenny Pickett did start, that would derail my thoughts on the team. Just want to clarify that.
Derail your thought like on the team as a whole, like just the whole season?
I
like
do
you're
not
out
want
on
Kenny.
Pickett?
I do not want Kenny Pickett starting this year. I don't want a rookie
Really?
quarterback. Yeah, I just give me Mitch Trubisky with the experience. Like I said, he's done it before with a similar team. I don't want to take my chances with a rookie quarterback because I feel like, in a way, I know what I'm going to get with Mitch Trubisky. With Kenny Pickett, he can come in and just be absolutely atrocious. True. So, if Trubisky struggles early on, I'll take it on the chin with that, and then you can bring Pickett in. But I don't want to see Pickett to start the season. And I don't think we're going to. A lot of times he was listed third on the depth chart in some cases, and yeah, it seems like it's all trending towards Trubisky. Even though I've been hearing Mason Rudolph has looked better than both of them in camp, but yeah. I think we've seen enough of Mason Rudolph.
Definitely. Maybe we'll get a few more of those reports, and then we'll get a 7 with Trubisky in week 1.
Yeah, there you go.
Start retweeting some Mason Rudolph has looked better than Trubisky.
Yes, tweets. There you go.
All right. I think I'm with you there on the Steelers. We'll get some weeks to bet on them, and then hopefully Trubisky can prove he's still a decent quarterback in this league.
All right.
I do have a player take on their one of their skill position players for a season-long prop here. Deontay Johnson. I'm pretty high on his unders this season. I think this is a good year to fade him. So I have him under 1,000 receiving yards and under 6.5 touchdowns in 3 seasons in Pittsburgh, 680-5, 920-7, and then 1160-8 last year. That's receiving yards and touchdowns. But we know that a ton of that was around the line of scrimmage. He had an incredibly low average depth of target. I think a lot of that.
Yeah, but that was everyone with Ben Roethlisberger.
No, but I'm just saying, like, especially him. Like, he was obviously the guy that benefited from that so much because he was kind of like Big Ben's number 1 target. Like, I think that you're going to see more Claypool shots down the field. You're going to see more George Pickens this year. Like, I feel like Deontay's not going to be as much of like the clear-cut number 1 wide receiver coming into this year with a different quarterback. And like, I think bringing in George Pickens into this offense gives them another weapons. Like, there's a lot of competition for targets. And like, even if it's Trubisky or Pickett, like, we don't know how good they're going to be. Like, this offense might just stink. I know that we're kind of saying that the Steelers can maybe grind out some wins. But like, I don't think either of us are projecting this offense to be very good. I think best case scenario, they're like the 20th best offense in the league. So I think this is a decent shot to take some unders on Deontay Johnson.
Yeah, I'm not taking a shot on the Steelers because of their offense. I'm taking a shot because of Mike Tomlin and the defense. Because the offensive line is still very bad, and yeah, there's still, even if Trubisky's playing well for Trubisky, isn't throwing for 275 yards and
probably
a couple touchdowns.
220, 1 touchdown and no interceptions.
Yeah, exactly. So you're gonna, if the Steelers team has success, it's gonna be winning games 20-17 and then 23-20 and things like that. It's not gonna be high scoring games.
Yeah. And I think I saw a quote from the owner, Art Rooney, earlier this offseason that he wants the team to run the ball more. So I don't know if that's going to happen, but I don't know if that's necessarily a great idea behind like the worst offensive line, but what he said.
Yeah, well, they tried to run the ball last year. Najee Harris was getting killed. Yeah, it's so frustrating because anytime Najee Harris gets space, he makes something happen, but
he doesn't get space very much.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, and they say they're going to limit his touches, but I'm sure he'll still end up with 400 touches. So
they're not very good at limiting touches.
No.
All right, I have one more player, not necessarily a prop, but player market that I wanted to dive into here. Do you have anything before I get into it?
No, go for it.
All right, Bengals defensive end Trey Hendrickson. How do you feel about him 20-1 to lead the NFL in sacks? This is available on Barstool or Unibet right now. Broke out in 2020 with the Saints, put up 13.5 sacks in 15 games. Comes over to Cincy last year, quietly dominated, put up 14 sacks. It ranked 5th in the NFL. The only players in the last 2 years combined with more sacks than Hendrickson are TJ Watt and Myles Garrett, which is important because when you look at the odds for this market, the favorites are TJ Watt and Myles Garrett, plus 500 and plus 600. You go all the way down the board to the 9th highest odds on the board behind Robert Quinn, behind Chandler Jones, behind a couple other guys. Trey Hendrickson sitting there at 20-1. Obviously, TJ Watt is a deserved favorite. Myles Garrett could have a big year, but I think at 20-1, there's some value because Hendrickson has been really, really good the last 2 seasons. It kind of seems like he's still on an upward trajectory. I don't know if necessarily have seen the best of him, and if the Bengals are playing with a lead in a lot of these games, you could see some favorable pass rush situations for him.
And what were the odds?
20-1, best you can find right now.
Wouldn't you rather take him at 50-1 to win Defensive Player of the Year?
It's not a bad idea.
If he leads the league,
if he does lead the league in sacks, yeah, he's probably going to
you're
win
getting him
that.
at more than double the price.
That's fair. Yeah, I mean, he's not necessarily like a big name. Like I think some of that's like narrative, but yeah, I mean, if he did lead the league in sacks, it's going to be hard to make a case for someone else who finished behind him. It could happen, but yeah, no, that's a really good thought.
Yeah,
kind of like that better.
I got your back.
All right, there we go. We just settled on an even better bet after discussing it. That's why I bring these up. All right, that was all I had on this division. All my player prop thoughts for now. Anything left for you?
No, we'll be diving into the awards next week, correct?
Yes. So next week we'll do a nice little overview on all the awards out there. We'll go through each one, any bets that we have, any important takeaways, how to approach the market, what kind of the history of the award is, what we're looking for in a winner. So I think that'll be a lot of fun. And yeah, see everyone next week. So that wraps up our division preview for the NFL season. Any questions, comments, or concerns, hit us up on Twitter at BetRightPod. Leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Smash the like button on YouTube. From Jeff and Rue, we are the Bet Right Sports Betting Podcast, because every time you bet with us, you bet right.